Okay, basically today we are going to be covering on substantive procedure. That's the plan for today and tomorrow. Let me just share my screen. So you guys can actually, another thing is I've uploaded another set of questions on Anchor Co on your Timba Flex. That is going to be the question that we are attempting today, plus with the question on the module, because the question on the module tu macam most of it are like a little bit more difficult. So maybe you guys can firstly download the question from your Timba Flex, okay, on Anchor Co. So let's just briefly look into the exam technique on substantive procedure. Okay, substantive procedure ni, if you guys like really attempt it properly kan, actually this can be the cause of your passing or failing, because it actually makes up for 20% or even more, because sometimes substantive procedures ni will be asked not only in your section B, okay, but it will also be asked in your section A in the MCQ. So it can add up to 25% juga, okay, just for this substantive procedure. So there's two ways of actually answering your substantive procedures. Okay, how are you going to nail your substantive procedures in your finals? Basically, there's two methods. Firstly, we do it by technique, by the proper technique, or the second method is one that I would really not advise, but I would say that it is doable. Okay, second technique is just by memorizing. Okay, memorize. Okay, so in this stage in AA, usually even if you memorize, you will still be able to get some marks out of it. However, if you want to memorize, you have to memorize and apply to the scenario. Okay, so it's very important for you to know the technique. However, it is also equally as important for you to memorize and look through the substantive procedures that you have. Okay, so if you guys look into your Timba Flex, I've also uploaded okay, other than the encore questions, I've also uploaded a set of substantive procedure notes. Okay, so this is just like a general to give you guys a general idea of what kind of substantive procedures that we can do for different accounts. Okay. Okay, so you guys can look through your notes. Basically, I've included for almost everything. This is on the intangible asset, for the PPE, for the bank balances. So this is something you guys can look back into. However, today I want to try to teach you guys to not just memorize, but design your substantive procedures in relation to what the question requires you to do. Okay, because this is something that's very important, not just in your AA syllabus, but it is something that will be brought forward in case you take AAA, but also will be brought forward in your working world later on. Okay, because most of the case is that when you enter audit, let's say if you guys are planning to take up audit, you actually don't know what is the procedure that we have to do. Okay, although your seniors will guide you, but more or less you should have a little bit of an idea of where we should start with. Okay, so this will be kind of like a guideline for you later on. So, okay, let's go back to the module. Okay, so what are the common mistakes that the candidate will do is that you do not write the purpose, or you do not provide sufficient detail. Basically, you are not very specific in your substantive procedure. The issue is we have to be as specific as we can. Okay, for example, for these two examples, review relevant documents to ensure the accuracy of the amount capitalized. Okay, can you guys try to answer what is wrong with the sentence? Okay, can you guys type in the chat box where did this student go wrong here? Basically, the first issue here is no specific document. Yes, it's not as specific as possible. Review relevant documents. So what document that we have to review right now, right? We have to be very specific what kind of documents we want to review. For example, maybe we can say purchase invoice. Okay, so this is just an example. Review purchase invoice to ensure the accuracy of the amount capitalized. Okay, so for the second point, what do you guys think is the main issue here? Review correspondence with customers. Okay, what's the issue for the second question? The second question pula, the issue is no purpose, yeah? So basically, there is no purpose. What is the purpose of us reviewing this correspondence with customers? For example, review correspondence, maybe how we can fix this sentence is review correspondence with customers to assess likelihood of customer making the payment. To assess likelihood of customer making payment. Okay, so this is an example. Or as Mimi said, no assertion. Okay, maybe we review the correspondence with customers basically to assess the adequacy of allowances. Okay, this is just an example. To assess the adequacy of allowances for receivables. Okay, so and another very serious issue is that sometimes you guys get too excited in doing substantive procedures that you guys just try to throw on whatever that you guys have in memory. Then, however, you are not answering what is the question. Okay. So for example here, the question required procedures for valuation assertion. So it is very specific here. But if you were to answer, let's say that there are procedures for valuation of trade receivables, okay? Valuation for trade receivables. Right now, suddenly you say, compare the trade receivables for current year against the prior year. Okay. So basically this answer, it is correct, but because you are not answering the question. The question actually asks you for the valuation assertion specifically. So right now, when you answer something like this, it is too generic and it does not answer to the requirement of the question. Okay, so these are simple ways where you can actually get your SP question wrong. Okay, so this is the exam technique on how we are going to answer for substantive procedures. Basically, I will use the PSP method. Okay, so the P stands for the procedure, okay, S stands for the subject matter, and the last P stands for purpose. So when we talk about purpose, okay, to give you guys an idea when you guys are writing, okay, the first is basically either as a part of analytical procedure. For example, when we are doing analytical procedure, like here, we compare trade receivables for current year against prior year. Okay, so this is a example of analytical procedure. So what is the purpose of us comparing the trade receivables for the current year against the prior year? Is basically the purpose is we want to investigate any significant differences. Okay, so this is the purpose. And another thing is basically in accordance to the IAS. What does this mean is, for example, if let's say we are talking about capitalization of an intangible asset, okay? Maybe we are talking about capitalization of development expenditure. Okay, if you guys still remember, the development expenditure, we will have to meet certain criteria as per IAS 38. Okay, we have to meet the criteria of PIRATE, right? Okay, so basically maybe we will obtain a breakdown of this development expenditure, and we want to review. The purpose is basically we want to review whether the development expenditure meets the capitalization criteria as per IAS 38. Okay, so this is another example of how you can write your purpose. Basically, we are explaining what is the requirement of the related accounting standards. Okay, and the next is basically to confirm an assertion, like Anis Shamimi said just now. So basically, there is two kinds of assertion. Okay, so I want to explain to you guys because most of you guys are first time joining my class and have not gone through this. So I want to explain on what is POCA and what is CRAF. Okay, so let me just write in a different page. Okay, so let's just kind of recap a little bit on your assertions. Okay, so basically we have assertions related to your SOFP. Your SOFP. And then you have assertions related to your SOPL. Okay, so when we are talking about assertions related to SOFP, I will basically use CRAF. Okay, the mnemonic of CRAF. So the first C here, okay, stands for completeness. Okay. R stands for the rights and obligation. Okay, wait, actually I would say that this is like C to the power of 2 because there's 2C. Okay, so the second C here is basically on the classification and presentation. rights and obligation. E stands for existence. D stands for valuation. Okay. So most of you guys who have actually gone through this before, you might think like, is this really important for us to like get back into this? This seems so very basic. However, in SP, it's very important for you to really understand what these assertions mean, because if they were to test you specifically on a specific assertion, again, if you do not understand the meaning of it, you will not be able to answer correctly. Okay. So let's just briefly go into each of these assertions. Okay. So for example, on the first assertion of completeness, okay, I want to give an example of physical asset. Okay, so let's say if we were to purchase a new asset right now, let's say we were to purchase a table. Okay, so this is the physical asset. Okay, and then basically, once we have acquired this physical asset, this will flow into the, where will it flow into? Where will it be recorded in, guys? This physical asset. Where will it firstly be recorded in? It will be recorded in the, in the NCAR, the non-current asset register. Okay, or the NCAR. Okay, and then this will basically flow into the PPE ledger and then into the trial balance. Okay, and then lastly in the disclosure note. Disclosure note in the financial statements. Okay, so this entire process from this side to this side, basically we will be testing on the completeness. Okay, when we are tracing, okay, tracing from the physical asset to the NCAR, to the PPE ledger, to the trial balance, and lastly to the disclosure note in the financial statements. This is for us to confirm the completeness assertion. It basically means, what this completeness means is basically, is it recorded properly or not? Has it been recorded properly in the financial statements? Okay, so that is basically the assertion of completeness. Okay, basically, to make sure that there is none missing out. Okay, this is basically touching on the risk of understatement. Okay, however, if we were to go the other way around, okay, maybe we select a certain transaction within the disclosure note in the financial statements to the physical asset. Basically, this is to confirm on the existence. Okay, do you guys understand so far this concept here? Okay, when we are basically choosing a transaction, for example, we are looking at the PPE ledger right now. Okay, and then we see an addition of this table, right? Okay, so right now we will select this transaction and then we will look whether has it been recorded in the non-current asset register, and then we will review the physical asset because we want to confirm, does this table actually exist or not? Okay, so this is basically focusing on the risk of overstatement. Okay, we are basically concerned about the risk of basically this asset not even existing in the first place, right? For example, macam let's say if the client basically recorded a building in their PPE ledger, right? And then so right now we want to basically do a site visit to confirm, does this building actually exist or not, or are they just trying to overstate their assets? Okay, so this is basically on completeness and existence. Okay, so when we are talking about classification, is an example is maybe on your loan. Okay, for example is on your loan. Okay, so when we are doing a loan, loan is a form of NCL, right? So it is a SOFP item. So when we are auditing on the loan, basically we want to confirm that it is basically split, okay? To confirm the split between the CL and NCL. So this is an example when we are testing the assertion of classification and presentation. Okay. Next is on the rights and obligation. For example, if you were to look at, okay, when you purchase a land, okay, what document will you basically get, or what document can you review when you purchase land? Okay, can you guys type in the chat box? Okay, so basically, okay, when you purchase land, Azim said title deed. Yeah, that's correct. Basically, when you purchase land, then you will have a title deed. Okay, so this title deed is just a document, right? When you purchase land, for example. Okay. So when we are testing on the rights and obligations, basically we will review this title deed and we want to know, we want to assess whether is it in the name of the client or not. Okay. Confirm whether it is in the name of the client. Okay. Right? So on the valuation is basically we are testing the dollar amount. Okay, is it accurate or not? So when we are testing the dollar amount, maybe we can we can just look into the title deed, we can look into the purchase invoice. Basically, we want to see when we compare to the purchase invoice, is it the same amount? Okay, maybe we will look into the purchase invoice and then we will see is the amount recorded in the purchase invoice same to the one that has been recorded in the non-current asset register. Okay, so valuation touches on the dollar amount that is recorded in the financial statements. Okay, so this is just briefly on the assertions relating to SOFP item, and next is basically on the SOPL item. Okay, SOPL item. This is where we will basically touch on the next assertion that we use, which is PREV. Okay, the assertions that will be used is COCA. Okay, so the C here stands for same thing, completeness. The O stands for occurrence. C stands for classification. The other C stands for cut-off. And lastly, stands for accuracy. Okay. So similarly here, if let's say if we were to do if we were to make a sale, okay, so the customer will basically place an order. Okay, so this is the sales system, if you guys still remember, right? The PO, the customer will basically submit a PO, a purchase order, and then we will basically generate a sales order. Okay, and then basically we will generate a GDN, and then we will generate and submit a sales invoice, and then it will be recorded in the sales ledger. Okay. So when we are testing from here all the way here, basically when we are agreeing from the purchase order, basically we pick up a purchase order, okay, we trace from this purchase order to the sales order, to the GDN, to the sales invoice, and lastly to the sales ledger. We are basically checking one by one by one by one. Basically, this is to confirm on the completeness. It's the same thing. Okay? We are basically agreeing, if we are tracing from the purchase order all the way to the sales ledger for us to confirm on the completeness. Okay, this is something that's very important for you guys to note, because for almost every SP, I want you guys to kind of think of what is the process here. Okay, how is this transaction being recorded from the source documentation all the way to the financial statements. All right. So from there, if you guys do this cycle, you guys can kind of see and kind of know how are you going to design your sentence. Okay. So basically, if we are going back from the sales ledger, we are agreeing back a transaction from the sales ledger all the way to the source documentation, which is the sales order. This is to agree back to confirm on the occurrence. Okay. So again, the completeness here is basically the same thing, the same concept up here. Okay. We want to ensure that it is recorded properly. Okay. And occurrence is just the same thing, as it's a little bit similar to existence. Basically, occurrence is more or less to ensure that all transactions are legit. Okay. All transactions are legit and not fictitious. Basically, none are fictitious. Okay. And so next is on the classification. Okay. An example is, for example, between your capex versus revex. Okay. So maybe we want to obtain a breakdown of this expenditure, and then we want to assess whether they are a capex or a revex. The purpose is for us to basically ensure that it is recorded in the correct accounts. Because if it is a capex, we will capitalize, and if it is a revex, we will expense it off, right? Okay, so right now, if this is not correctly accounted for, then basically there will be a misstatement in your accounts, right? Okay, moving on to the next one is cut off. Cut off is basically the assertion relating to when we are making sure that it is correctly accounted for in the correct accounting period. Okay, so this is actually a very important assertion that I want to put a star on, because your examiner likes to ask on the cut off. Okay, So lastly is on the accuracy. When we talk about accuracy, is basically we want to be accurate on the amount recorded. Okay, so we want to, similarly, we are focusing on the dollar amount here. Okay, so basically we can maybe recalculate whatever amounts to ensure mathematical accuracy. So this is just an example. Okay, so this is on the assertions. Maybe I will also like upload this in your Timba Flex later on just for your reference. Okay, so do you guys have any questions regarding this assertion so far before we actually start into your questions? Thumbs up, guys. Okay, we can move on, right? Okay. So basically, how we are going to actually answer is through this PSP method. Okay, so this is an example. So usually we use the mnemonic of AEIOU. Okay, A stands for analytical procedure. Analytical procedure is again just a fancy name for comparing. We are comparing whatever ratios or whatever overall revenue, for example. Okay, E stands for inquiring. I stands for inspect. O stands for observe. The U here stands for recalculate. So I would say that these are the 5 main ones that you will use when you are actually doing your SP. However, these are other examples that you can actually use too. Okay, so this is just an example. So this is basically an example of the subject matter. Okay, so when we talk about the subject matter, it can be, for example, here, when we inquire, we want to be very specific. Who are we inquiring with? Are we inquiring with the finance director, the credit controller? Okay, for what? To confirm on, maybe we are discussing, maybe we are inquiring with the credit controller, for example, inquire with the credit controller to confirm the customer's likelihood of making payment. Okay, this is an example. Okay, inspect a document. Okay, let's say we cannot just inspect relevant document, right? That is one of the example of how students actually get it wrong, right? We cannot just review relevant documents. We have to be very specific. For example, we want to inspect the sales invoice to confirm the completeness of records and agree to the supporting documents. Okay, so this is an example of how you will basically construct your sentence. Okay, so basically this is just to give you guys a little bit of an idea of how you guys are going to answer. If you guys are ready, maybe we can jump into the questions, but hold on. Okay, so again, you guys can just refer to my notes here at any time if you guys while we are doing this class. Okay, just for your reference, if you guys are not used to actually doing questions on SP. Okay, maybe can you guys just like rate over 10? How good you guys think you are at answering your substantive procedures? Can you just like rate in the chat so that we can kind of like, I can kind of assess what level you guys are at. Okay, so out of 10 lah, how pro are you at actually answering substantive procedures? Okay, so out of 10, 5. Okay, so most of you guys are like 5 or a 4. Okay, all right. Wait, this is out of 5 or this is out of 10? Okay, so it's okay. If this is out of 10, it's okay, guys. All right. This is basically the purpose of this spring class, right? For us to basically kind of learn on how we want to tackle this. Okay. All right. Let's start into the questions. Have you guys downloaded the question of Anchor? Okay, because this is the first question I want to run through first. Okay, actually the questions I've included in the module here are like a little bit more difficult, so I feel like I want to start with a little bit a more okay one. Okay, so let's start off with Anchor, if you guys are ready. Okay, so the first step in basically answering your SP question, first things first, we have to go through the question. Okay, whatever it is, go through the requirement first. Okay, so right now they have asked you to describe the SP in relation to Anchor's vehicle additions and disposal. Okay, they have specifically said vehicle addition and disposal. Okay, so right now it is 6 marks. Okay, so kat sini basically every 1 mark is 1 SP. Okay, so in total you will need 6 full and complete substantive procedures in accordance to the PSP method. Alright, if you guys do not write your purpose, that is when the examiner will not give you guys mark. Okay, make sure that you have completed the P, the S, and then the P. Okay, so for an example on this question, this specific question, okay, I want to bring you guys through my notes on the IS 16 here. Okay, it's a bit laggy. Okay, on the PPE. Okay, so I just want to just state that I know that it's a lot easier for you guys who are actually working in audit for you to answer this. Okay, but for most of us who do not have experience, I would say that the way of designing this is more of like we have to kind of like tell a story. We have to create a picture, and from this picture or from this story, that is where we will like construct our sentences. Okay, so for example here kan, this is just like a very overall view of how we calculate PPE. Okay, so most of you guys might already know this. Okay, but let's just like dive into how we want to answer when we are tested on PPE. Okay, so firstly, it will start with the balance carried forward from the prior year plus any additions minus disposal. Okay, and then basically when there is a disposal, there will be a gain or loss on disposal, and then we will minus whatever write-offs, and then we will basically reflect any revaluation. For example, if it's a gain, we will increase the value of PPE. If it is a loss, this will be a decrease in the value of PPE. And then we will deduct whatever depreciation. And finally, we will get to the carrying amount. Okay, so this is very simple. From this, that is how we will construct the substantive procedure. Basically, we are going to talk about each one of these components in the valuation or calculation of your PPE. Okay, so right now, before we go to answering the actual question just now, I want to kind of just like explain to you guys the overall of PPE, for example, here. Okay, so basically the first thing that we can do then, okay, is analytical procedure. Okay, analytical procedure is basically we will compare. This is just if like, let's say if overall, okay, we can compare the PPE for the current year against prior year to investigate any significant differences. Okay, analytical procedure is an answer that is very risky because not all SP you can actually use this answer. Okay, it is very unlikely for you to actually use this answer if they were to ask you very specifically. So macam I would say that this is like a little bit risky lah. Okay, so let's basically look into again, like I stated just now, right? From the physical, let's say when there is an addition, right? Okay, when there is an addition, let's say this is the physical asset. Okay, this is the physical asset. And then it will flow into the NCAR, right? Non-current asset register. And then this will go into the PPE ledger, into the trial balance, and lastly to the disclosure note. Okay, and then again, so again from here to here, what are we testing on, guys? Okay, if we are tracing from the physical asset to the disclosure notes in the financial statements, what are we testing? We are basically testing on the completeness, right? Okay, so if you guys notice the sentence, basically, we will trace from the physical PPE to the NCAR to the PPE ledger to ensure completeness of the PPE records. This is how you guys will basically write your sentence, okay? So I've colored like, I've specifically changed the color. So like blue is basically the procedure. The one that I have done in red is the subject matter, okay? And to ensure completeness, the one in green is basically the purpose, okay? So that's why your answer must include all three of that, okay? The procedure, the subject matter, and the purpose. Similarly, we want to, if we are going back from the disclosure note to the physical asset, what are we testing again, guys? When we are agreeing back, what are we testing? We are testing on the existence. Yeah, correct, guys. Okay, so similarly here, we will agree back from the PPE ledger to the NCA register to ensure the existence and physically inspect the sample of PPE to ensure existence. All right. And another thing that we can do is, okay, so this is like the first picture I want you guys to paint. How does the cycle of recording actually work? Second is basically we want to think of what is the source documentation here. Okay. So let's say, for example, if we are purchasing a land, right? If we are purchasing a land, or maybe we are purchasing a motor vehicle, or what else? Okay, land, motor vehicle. Maybe we are purchasing, okay, we are just purchasing, let's say, a table. Okay, it can be anything, right? So land, maybe we can look into the title deed, right? Okay, maybe this motor vehicle will usually have some kind of registration. What is it called? Registration. Okay, table, I know we can look into the purchase invoice. Okay, motor vehicle, we are going to look into the, okay, I don't remember, but basically we can also just say purchase invoice here juga. Okay, we can just look into the purchase invoice. Okay, why we are looking into the purchase invoice? It is to confirm two things. Okay, we can confirm on the, basically the purpose is for us to confirm that this land, this motor vehicle or this table, first things first, we want to confirm that it is under the client's name. Okay, so when we are confirming that it's under the client's name, what assertion are we testing on, guys?
Rights and obligation.
Yes, the rights and obligation. Okay, so this is number one when we are looking at that. Second is basically we are confirming on the valuation. Okay, on the dollar amount here. Okay, So this is an example of how we would basically write your substantive procedure. So these are other examples. We can recalculate, okay? We can recalculate on the depreciation charge. And if you guys remember, that's why I feel like it's very important for you guys to go back to this breakdown of how do you actually calculate from the opening all the way to the closing, because it will give you guys an idea of what do we want to talk about. So basically here we've covered on the addition, okay? And in my answer, I have talked about the depreciation, okay? So here we can recalculate on the depreciation charge based on its cost, its useful life, and the RV, okay, to ensure mathematical accuracy. And then we want to compare the depreciation rates, okay? So these are just examples. So even in our question just now, if we go back to Anchor, they have specifically stated for us to talk about SP in relation to addition and disposal, okay? So right now, we cannot talk about all these other things, okay? We can only talk about the addition and the disposal. That's why SP, you have to be very specific, okay? If you were to memorize, let's say, if you were to memorize this entire thing, okay, and then suddenly you might you might give your answers that are not related. For example, you suddenly talk about the analytical procedure here, but it is not answering to the question, which requires you to just talk about the addition and the disposal, okay? So let's just look into the addition. Basically, we can inspect the invoice for the newly acquired asset and to agree to the NCAR and the PPE ledger to confirm completeness. To confirm completeness, okay? And then we can physically inspect the new addition to ensure existence, okay? When there is a disposal, we want to inspect the NCAR to ensure that all disposed assets have been removed, and we want to recalculate any gains or losses on disposal, okay? And another thing is whenever there is an acquisition or a disposal, we can inspect the board minute meetings for discussions relating to this, okay? So another thing is we want to review the sales invoice relating to the asset disposed, okay? So this is just briefly for us to look through the notes, okay? So somebody asked, physically inspect tu still boleh guna ke? Okay. So for this one this asset, we can tahu because we want to ensure the existence of the PPE. However, there's another point I think tu nanti I'll go into. For example, I think there's this one that is no longer applicable on inventory. Okay, this one I have already excluded it. Okay, I think I've already excluded it kot. Yeah, I've already excluded it, so I rasa tak ya. Oh yeah, this one, number 9. Physically inspect WIP to assess reasonableness of percentage of completion. Okay, so this is, I hope that you guys can cancel this off from your notes juga, because I think that this is no longer applicable. So in your previous questions, Pasir pun actually ada je that they have answered like this, but I think that it's not very logical for us, let's say as people who may not have sufficient experience. If we were to inspect this WIP, we will still not be able to assess the reasonableness of the percentage of completion. So this one, I would like you guys to cancel it out. Okay. However, on the NCA, I think this answer is still very much valid because we want to confirm on the existence. Does the asset actually exist in the first place? Okay. So let's jump back into the question, on the Anchor question. Okay. Are you guys ready? Let's jump into the question. Okay, let's look through the scenario together. Okay. Okay, I'm just going to skip out on everything else kat atas tu. Okay. I think that the most important for you to highlight is the financial year end. Okay. The financial year end is 30th April 20x5. Okay. So let's focus on the vehicle additions and disposals. On the 1st February, Anchor Co replaced 20 of its recycling vehicles. The old vehicle had a carrying amount of 1.8 million as recorded in the NCAR and were given in part exchange against new vehicles costing 4.6 million. Okay, cash consideration of 3.9 was also paid. So can you guys give me the double entry for this entire line here? What is the double entry here? Okay. When the old vehicle is basically given out, we will credit your PPE on the old vehicle. Maybe I'll write this here. Okay, basically we will credit the PPE for the old vehicle amounting to 1.8 million, and then we are going to record a new asset, okay, the replaced asset, the new vehicles costing 4.6 million. Basically we will debit the new PPE, okay, for the new vehicles costing 4.6 million. Okay, and then they said cash consideration of 3.9 million was also paid. So we will credit bank or cash by 3.9 million. Okay, so here, what is the balancing figure here, right? Can you guys calculate what is the balancing figure here? And what does this stand for? So basically, the answer is 1.1 million. And then this 1.1 million will be a debit. So this will be a loss on disposal. That will be expense off to the SOPL. Okay, so right now, from this double entry, I want to basically expand and give the substantive procedure. We want to talk about each of this SP and how can we basically actually write our substantive procedures from this. Okay, so I will basically share my screen. So maybe the first question, we will do it together. But after that, I want you guys to try to attempt yourself. Okay, so are you guys ready? Can we write it together? Not just you guys watching me? Let me just open my Word first. Okay, so Najwa is ready. Hold up, guys. I don't have to open it on my... Okay. Can you guys see my screen? Let's start. Okay, so for this question, okay, let's firstly start on the SP. Okay, when you guys are writing, make sure to SP on vehicle addition and disposal. So it's 6 marks. Make sure you guys have included that this is 6 SP when you guys are answering. Okay. So the first thing is, again, when there is an addition and disposal, kan, we will basically, what is the cycle like? What is the supporting document? Okay. This will flow from the purchase invoice to the casual of additions into the non-current asset register, to the trial balance and the financial statements. Okay. And then just now, like I said, okay, let's just I'll just rewrite again. PPE for the new vehicle, amounting to, how much was it just now? To 4.6 million. I just want to rewrite this. On disposal, 1.1 million. Credit PPE, the old vehicle, for 1.8 million. Credit bank for the cash consideration of 3.9 million. Okay. All right. So first things first is I want you guys to use this sentence. Okay. So this is a technique that I've taught my students that applies for almost all substantive procedures. Okay. In this case, it is called the number one. It's called the obtain, task, and agree method. Okay. So this is the first technique that for almost all of the substantive procedures you can use. Okay. So when we are answering on SP, I want you guys to try to highlight those that are very repetitive and that you can use for almost all. Okay. So obtain, task, and agree. Okay. How are we going to answer in relation to this question? It's basically we will obtain a casual or a listing or a breakdown. Okay. So this is standard. Okay. Standard for any SP. Obtain a casual, listing, a breakdown. So right now this is on the additions and disposals, right? So right now we are going to relate to the scenario. We are going to obtain a schedule of additions to vehicles. We will cast and agree to the, okay, this will basically go back to this point here, to the cycle here. Okay, we want to agree to the trial balance and the disclosure note in the financial statements, okay, to confirm completeness, to ensure completeness of additions of PPE, additions of vehicles. Okay, in this case, we are talking about vehicles. So basically, the only thing that changes right now is this part here. Okay, so this is the only thing that will vary between different questions. This is the only sentence where we will basically apply back to the scenario. Everything else is just the same. So I want you guys to remember this obtain cash and agree method. Okay. And the next thing, let's talk about the credit bank. Okay. So let's talk credit the PPE here. Okay. Credit PPE. So when we credit PPE, then all this PPE will be recorded in the NCAR, right? In the NCAR. So when we want to describe this credit PPE, we want to make sure that they have actually excluded or they have removed the old vehicle from the non-current asset register. Okay, so we want to review the NCAR to confirm that the 20 old vehicles were removed and the 20 new vehicles have been included. Okay, so again, review is the procedure, NCAR is the subject matter. To confirm that the 20 old vehicles were removed and the 20 new vehicles have been included, this is the purpose. Okay, so are you guys clear so far? So basically we've talked about, this is basically on the credit PPE on the old vehicle, and then basically on the new vehicle also, right? Okay, so right now we've touched on the PPE, and then we want to confirm this credit bank. Okay, how can we confirm that this cash consideration was also paid out? Okay, what can we review to confirm that this cash consideration being paid out? Can you guys type in the chat box? What can we review? We will basically, so we will look into the bank statement. Yes. So there's two things. Whenever there is cash involved, we will review the bank statement and cash book. Okay. So right now, we want to talk about credit bank name. We will basically agree the cash payment of 3.9 million to cash book and bank statement to confirm that the cash consideration paid out for the replacement of vehicles. Okay, so as you guys see, for each and every one of my procedures, I have actually applied to the scenario, right? I have talked about the 20 vehicles being removed and 20 new vehicles have been included, and I have used this 3.9 million from the scenario. Okay, so this is where you will have to apply to the scenario. Okay, it cannot be too generic. All right, so next is on the loss on disposal. Okay, we want to actually recalculate, did they actually appropriately calculate this or not? We want to recalculate the loss on disposal of 1.1 million. Okay, maybe you guys can put in the calculation here to be more specific. 4.6 million minus 1.8 plus 3.9 million, right? Okay, recalculate the loss on disposal and agree to the trial balance and statement of profit or loss to confirm accuracy. Okay, so another thing that we can basically do is we can recalculate the depreciation charges. Okay, depreciation charge. So even from the scenario here, they have stated that Encore has replaced 20 of its recycled vehicles on 1st of February. So we have to confirm that they have accounted for this depreciation properly. Okay, so another thing to note here is that basically on the depreciation can, from basically before 1st February, the depreciation charge will be calculated like this: the percentage times the old cost, right? The original cost, the old or the original cost of 1.8 million, the original cost or the carrying amount. Okay, so after 1st February, the depreciation charge will be calculated as the percentage times the new cost of vehicles. Okay, so we have to make sure that they have accounted for this accurately. We recalculate the depreciation expense, confirming that the depreciation expense was based on the old vehicles until 1st of February and on the cost of new vehicles after this date. Okay, recalculate. Okay, so another almost certain point that you can use for almost all SP. Okay, we will review the disclosure. Okay, review the disclosure within the notes to the financial statements on the additions and disposal of vehicles to confirm that it is in accordance with the applicable standard, okay, in accordance with IF 16 PPE. Okay, so this answer here is something that is very helpful, that will help you guys for almost every aspect, every SP. We want to review the disclosure. Is it in line with the financial accounting standards? Okay, so let's say if you really don't remember what is the specific IS in here, okay, how you guys can reword it instead, excuse me, is basically that it is in accordance with the applicable financial, the applicable accounting standard and relevant laws and regulations. Okay, so this is a more general point if you guys really do not remember the accounting standard. But it would be better if you guys can include the specific accounting standard here lah. Okay, so right now we've got 6 SP. Are you guys clear on this first point here? Okay, are we okay? Can we move on to the next question? Or to the next part? Okay. Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, I hope that you guys can try to attempt this next point pula. Okay, but it's okay. I will take you guys through it and kind of like explain to you guys, because I feel like SP is something that is very, you have to practice it. Okay, you have to try to practice it. You have to submit your answers to Padlet and I will review whether this answer is it correct or not. Okay, because most of the time, I feel like the issue with students is not that you guys cannot do it, it's that you guys can do it tau, but you guys are not getting the marks. Is that correct? Most of the time, it's not that you guys are leaving it blank, it's just that you are not getting the marks and you do not understand why are you not getting the marks. Okay, so I hope that you guys can try to attempt yourself and submit it to the Padlet, and I will basically kind of just bring you guys through it. Okay, I will mark and assess balik. Okay, hold on. Okay, so the next question basically is asking on the describe SP specifically on the valuation. Okay, so in this case, it is already very specific. So if they have stated on the valuation specifically, you cannot use my technique of obtain, cast, and agree. Okay, so when we are talking about valuation, we are talking about the dollar amount. Okay, so basically, the dollar amount in the financial statements, right? How do we basically get to the closing balance? Is the trade receivables minus any allowances, allowance for doubtful debt, and then we will get the closing trade receivables. Okay, so basically we want to assess each of these. Okay, we want to assess the trade receivables, the allowance for doubtful debt, and the closing trade receivables. Okay, so in this case, when we are talking about valuation, there's this one document that we will basically look into to assess and identify slow moving balances. What is the document or what is the listing, guys, that we will review when we are identifying slow moving balances? Basically, it is the age receivables listing, right? It doesn't matter listing ke report ke, okay? Age receivables listing, yes. Okay, so first things first, we want to review the aged receivables listing. Okay, we want to review the aged receivables listing to identify any slow moving assets. Okay, but if right now, if you guys just review this listing without doing anything, do you guys think that it is effective? No, right? Because we are just okay, I've misclicked macam kecil. Okay, hold on. I don't know why is it small. Let me try to make it bigger. I don't know why it's small actually. Okay. Okay, now is it okay? Now it's a bit bigger kan? Should be a bit better. Okay, so basically the first point is on the age receivables. Okay, so we want to look into the age receivables listing. If we just review this is not sufficient. Okay, this comes as a set. We will review the age receivables listing and then we will have to discuss with the credit controller. Okay, this is very specific. Okay, the credit controller is the one who will be chasing these outstanding debts. Okay, we want to discuss with the credit controller on the likelihood of customer making payment. Okay, to basically assess. Okay, the purpose is to assess adequacy of allowances made. Okay, so this is number one. Okay, so another thing is basically, basically, even from this scenario, if you look through it, Encore Co's credit controller left the company and has only recently been replaced. So this is an indicator that there's no one chasing outstanding debts. Okay, so this is a problem here, right? Okay, so another thing is the trade receivable collection period has increased. This is also another indicator here that basically customers are taking longer to pay, taking longer to make payment. Okay, so another thing is the year-end trade receivables amounted to 9.1 million. If you guys notice here, there has been an increase in 2 million. However, the allowance have only increased by how much here? By 40K. So again, if we're talking about the valuation, we want to basically touch on, is this allowance sufficient or not? Okay, that is the main purpose here. We want to review whether the allowance, is it actually sufficient? Because if not, the receivables may be overstated. Okay, so right now we've talked about reviewing the age receivables listing. Next is basically another thing that we will do. So these two I want you guys to remember, because this will not only be used in answering your SP, this will help you when you are actually answering on the auditor's approach, okay? So another thing that we will do is perform extended cash year-end testing. Extended post-year-end cash receipts testing. Okay. Basically, we want to review whether these customers have they actually eventually made payment or not. Okay. We are basically to review slow-moving balances, slow-moving receivable balances. Okay. So most of the time, I feel like the hard part about SP is that you might not be sure of the subject matter that you want to review. Okay. So again, I want to highlight more on what is the subject matter right now, because this is something that you will only learn through practice. Okay, perform extended post-year-end cash receipts testing. And next is basically whenever there is whenever we are talking about receivables, especially when they are having any financial difficulties, we can review the customer correspondence. Okay, so we want to review the customer correspondence. Okay, basically this is any conversation between the customer and the client to identify whether there are any balances in dispute, okay, or whether there is additional allowance that is being required. Okay, maybe we can see other balances in dispute. Okay, so another thing that we can look into is we want to, okay, whenever there is significant concerns on the receivables balances, this will be discussed by the board. Okay, so when it's discussed by the board, where can we actually inspect this? What will we inspect in this case? We will inspect the board minute meetings, right? Okay. So the next thing is basically we want to inspect the board minute meetings for us to identify. Okay. Again, every time you guys talk about all this you have to make sure you are clear with why we are doing it. Okay. Most of the time, even in the working world, I would say that most people do not know why they are doing it. Okay. So I think it's most important for you to know why are we reviewing this board minutes. We want to identify whether there are any significant concerns in relation to the customer balances. Okay, because another thing is if this customer is a major customer, it can actually affect your going concern status, right? Okay, and next is we want to inspect, we want to obtain a breakdown for the allowance here. Okay, maybe we can look into this allowance. We want to obtain a breakdown of this allowance and we want to confirm whether we will basically recalculate. Okay, we want to recalculate and compare it to any potentially irrecoverable balances because we want to assess the adequacy of the allowance. Okay, lastly is we want to ask them, okay, we basically this irrecoverable receivables is an estimation. Okay, so another thing I want to highlight is whenever there is any estimation or whatever, let's say for example, a provision, this requires significant management judgment now. So anything that requires significant management judgment, we want to discuss with the management. Okay, we want to discuss with the management on the rationale for this level of allowances. Okay, so like I said just now, right, this has only increased by 40K. Okay, we want to assess is this increase sufficient or not, considering there has been an increase in the collection period from 49 days to 66 days and the fact that they do not have a credit controller. Okay, basically we want to discuss with the finance director discuss with the finance director the rationale for the level of allowances, as there has been a significant increase in the receivable collection period, and the fact that there is no credit controller, okay? Because we want to assess the reasonableness of this allowance. Again, whenever we discuss with management, we want to assess the reasonableness of their estimates, okay? So another thing that we can actually look into is whenever there is a return. Okay, for example, if the customer were to return something to us, return goods to us, what is the relevant document we will look into, guys? Whenever the customer return a good to us, what is the document we will inspect here? We will inspect the, okay, so we will inspect the credit note, yes. Okay, so we will basically inspect post year end, sales return, and credit note. Sales returns or credit notes. Credit notes. Okay. Basically, the reason why we want to look into this credit note is we want to assess whether an additional allowance is required or not. Okay, that's why we look into the post-year end credit notes. Because right now we want to assess if, let's say, the level of sales return is high. Okay, we can assess from the post-year end sales return is like there is a lot of sales returns. That is actually an indicator that additional allowance is required. Okay, inspect the post-year end sales return and credit notes. Basically, the purpose is to consider whether an additional allowance is required. Okay, is required. Okay, so from these 6 points that I have given you guys, can you guys just try to practice yourself for answering of this second question here on the valuation? So right now this is 5 marks. So according to the time limit, I should be giving you guys 9 minutes. Okay, so can I give you guys 9 minutes? We've discussed on this, so hopefully you guys can be able to answer it a little bit better. And I hope that you guys can basically submit it to the Padlet by the 9 minutes. Okay, so your 9 minutes will start now. I will see you guys at 9:09 on the dot. Okay. Okay, guys, time is up. Let's discuss on your answers. Okay, please share your answers in the Padlet. Okay, let's look into the answers. Okay. So by the way, to those of you guys who have uploaded on your Castle Career Co, I've actually included the marked version already in the Padlet. So if any of you guys who have attempted on Castle Career Co who want your answer script to be marked, just upload your answer in the Padlet and I will try my best to mark. Okay, so let's look into Haikal's answer. Okay. So review the age receivables listing in the current year and discuss with credit controller in relation to the receivables paying late. Okay, so here, where is it incomplete? Okay, right now, if we follow the PSP method, okay, you have talked about the procedure here. Okay, the age receivables listing is the subject matter, but you did not explain on the purpose of this, of why are you doing this. So can you guys explain what is the purpose that we actually review this in the first place? Okay, we discussed with the credit controller. Basically, how would I amend this is we want to discuss with the credit controller to assess the likelihood of customer making payment, okay, and the adequacy, okay, the adequacy of allowances for receivables. Okay, so I could not give you a mark because you did not include the purpose. Okay, if the examiner is very kind, they will basically give you maybe 0.5 marks. However, this is very subjective. One thing about audit is very subjective. It depends a lot on the examiner. So I would say that if you do not clearly state your purpose, in this case, you will not get your 1 mark. Okay, inspect the post-year and sales return or credit note to consider whether additional allowances is required. Okay, so this is 1 mark. Perform extended post-year end. Post-year end cash balances is the actual word is post-year end cash receipts testing. Okay, cash receipts testing. Okay, how does this post-year end cash receipts testing? Okay, basically we will look into the bank statement and the cash book post-year end to assess whether did any of the receivables make payment or not. Okay, because right now we are looking at the allowances as at the year end, right? Okay, so eventually after the year end, we want to look at the cash flow and the bank statement to assess whether the receivables are they eventually making payment or not. If they are still not making payment, maybe there is an additional allowance that is required. Okay, so perform extended post year end cash receipts testing in order to determine slow moving receivables balances. Okay, so in this case, you will get 1 mark. Okay, perform extended post year end cash receipts testing by reviewing the cash book and bank statement. Okay, inspect board minute meeting to agree on the number of allowances which are currently granted to receivables. Okay, I think that this is not very accurate. How we can fix this? Okay, inspect board minute meeting to assess any disputes with customers and the likelihood of customer making payment. Okay, let me just confirm this. Okay, basically we will to assess any disputes with customers and any significant concerns in relation to the outstanding receivables balances and assess whether the allowance is reasonable. Okay, basically what they discuss during these board minute meetings is, for example, if the customer is having any financial difficulty or if this customer is a major customer and there are indicators that the customer are unable to make payment. So these are things that will be discussed in the board minutes. Okay, so we want to assess any disputes with customer and any significant concerns. I think that this is the key point here. To assess any significant concerns. Okay, obtain breakdown of the number of receivables allowances. I think you can just say obtain breakdown of receivable allowances. This is not incurred. Okay, you just check out obtain breakdown of receivable allowances. Agree with the amount of irrecoverable debt. Okay, agree with the amount of potential irrecoverable debt, because right now this is just an estimation of our future. Okay, obtain a breakdown of the allowance, agree with the amount of potential irrecoverable debt in order to assess reasonableness of what. Okay, you have to be very specific to assess the reasonableness of allowances for receivables. Okay, so this is how you can improve on your answers. Okay, maybe I'll take one more. Okay, Najwa's answer. Discuss with the FD on why is the increase in the collection period, and assess the rationale on the irrecoverable receivable. Okay, we want to discuss with the FD. Your sentence is already like almost there, but your point is not really coming across right now. What we will discuss with the financial director is not on why is the increase in the collection period. We will discuss on the level of, basically the things that we will discuss with the management is anything that require their significant estimate. Okay, when what will we review is the estimate that they are making. So we want to discuss with the FD on the rationale for the level of allowance. Okay, for the level of allowance, to assess the reasonableness. Okay, as there has been an increase in receivable collection period, and that was an absence of credit controller. Okay, to assess the reasonableness of allowances for receivables. Okay, review the age receivables listing and discuss with the credit controller on the likelihood of the receivables to pay the debt. Okay, all right, this is okay because you have basically talked about the purpose here. We want to assess the likelihood of the receivable paying the debt. This is the purpose here. Okay, and discuss with the credit controller how you can reword this. Okay, discuss with the credit controller to assess the likelihood of the receivables paying the debt. So this is 1 mark. Okay, because you have stated the procedure, the subject matter, okay, and the purpose. Okay, review the customer correspondence and compare with the balance in the receivables listing. Okay, we will basically review the customer correspondence. What is the customer correspondence? It's any conversation that the client is having with the customer. For example, in the real life world, maybe macam right now I am checking up with my customer. Okay, why have you not made any payment? Okay, so the customer sekarang reply to my email. Oh, actually I have been having financial difficulties. That is why I have been making late payments. Okay, so that is the purpose why we review the customer correspondence. Basically to understand, we want to understand why they are making late payment. Okay, review the correspondence with customer to identify any balances in dispute. Okay, what is balances in dispute is, for example, if the customer has already paid you through a check. Okay, they have paid you through a check, and then maybe you have not received the check. Okay, the check has not been cleared at the bank, so this can actually cause a dispute in the balances. Okay, so review the correspondence with customer to identify first whether there are any balances in dispute or balances unlikely to be paid by the customer, and discuss with management whether additional allowance is required. Okay, obtain the breakdown, recalculate, and compare with the credit controller balance. Discuss and investigate if there are any. Okay, compare it to credit controller balance is wrong. Okay, we will basically compare this with the potentially irrecoverable balance. Okay, irrecoverable receivable balance. Okay, the reason is basically for us to assess the adequacy of the allowance. So more or less, the purpose is almost all the same. Inspect the board minute meeting to assess whether, okay, I think this is still, this is okay, right? So thank you for attempting. Okay, maybe I'll just take one more before we go on to the next part. Okay, on Putra's answer, obtain the age receivables listing to identify any slow-moving receivables. Okay, again, we obtain the listing, but we have to discuss. Okay, so right now, the only thing that you got wrong here is discuss with the FD. The person who is tracking or basically chasing outstanding debts is not the finance director, it is the credit controller, right? Okay, on the likelihood, okay, of receivables being paid. Okay, it's actually likelihood, but I can give this 1 mark. Likelihood. Okay, perform extended year-end cash receipts testing to check if there has any payments received from the trade receivables post year-end. Okay, so the reason is also to assess adequacy, to assess the adequacy of allowances. But even if you don't write this, I think I can give this 1 mark to check if there are any payment received from trade receivables post year-end. Okay, review customer correspondence to assess if there is balance in dispute. Okay, this is 1 mark. Inspect board minute meeting to assess whether there is a need to increase level of allowance for receivables. Okay. Okay, I think I can give this 1 mark too. Inspect post year end. Maybe it can be more clear here. Inspect board meetings, maybe for what are we actually looking? We want to identify whether there are any significant concerns in relation to outstanding receivables balances. Okay, but I can still give you 1 mark. Instead, post year-end sales return to consider whether the allowance is needed for receivables. This is also 1 mark. Okay, so this is a good attempt. All right, good attempt, Putra. Okay, so can we move on to the next question? I mean, the next part of the question on the potential breach. Okay, I feel like for this question, when I review you guys, when I ask you guys to rate out of 10 again, I noticed that you guys said 4 and 5. And I think that some of you guys, maybe for some of you guys, this is your first time attempting your SP questions. So I'm going relatively slow on the first day right now. I want to try to explain one by one. However, maybe tomorrow we will try to cover more questions and maybe we can speed it up a little bit. Okay. So for those of you guys who might think that my speed is a bit too slow, again, I'm sorry, but I think that I want to try to like focus more on like those who is like maybe macam this is their first time going through it. Okay. So let's go back to the question, to the scenario. Hold on. Okay, so the next point is on the potential breach of transport regulations. Okay, so in the scenario, they will basically change the scenario. However, whenever there is a breach or whenever there is a fine or whenever there is a non-compliance, these are all the same thing. Okay, they will basically, whenever there is a breach or non-compliance or whenever there is fine, that is actually should be a bonus mark for you because it is something that you can use the same SP over and over and over again. Okay, maybe you will just tweak a little bit, but most of the SP will be the same. Okay, so there is a potential breach in March 20X5. Okay, another thing, whenever there is a date, okay, make sure to highlight the date because that is actually, they are also kind of hinting to you, okay? They are hinting. So basically you have to go back and ask yourself, is this before or after the year end? Okay, so this is March. So this is before the year end. Okay, an employee made a complaint alleging that NCOCO has breached the regulation concerning maximum driving hours and compulsory rest breaks for drivers on the number of occasions. The Transport Authority has launched an investigation, but the directors are not intending to disclose this issue or make any provision, as they do not believe that the fine is material. Okay, so before anything, again, I want to bring you guys back to the table. Okay, I think that I've already like briefly gone through this with you guys. Okay, so this is if asset and this is liability. Okay, so this is on the accounting treatment. Okay, this is very repetitive, but just to kind of recap balik. Okay, can you guys answer then? Okay, if it is virtually certain, okay, and then if it is probable, if it is possible, and if the possibility is remote. Okay, so if it is a virtually certain asset, what is the accounting treatment, guys? Basically, if it is an asset, virtually certain, we will recognize as an asset, right? Recognize as asset. If it is a virtually certain liability, we will recognize as liability. If it is a probable liability, what will we do, guys? We will record a provision. Okay? You will recognize a provision. Okay, if a contingent asset, if it is a probable asset, then it will be a contingent asset. Yes. Okay, we will disclose contingent asset. If it is a possible liability, this will be disclosed as contingent liability. Possible, we will ignore. Similarly, if it's remote we will ignore. Okay, so basically, right now, the issue is that the directors, they do not want to create a provision, and they do not even want to disclose this matter. Okay, so right now, they basically believe that their chances of paying up this amount is remote lah. That is what the directors believe. Okay, so the first thing that we are going to do, number one, okay, whenever in this case whenever there is a potential breach, number one, we want to inquire. Okay, so right now, they have already stated in the question, they have stated where the director said that they do not believe that the potential fine is material, so they do not want to provide for it. Okay, so number one, we will inquire with the directors. Okay, I will just briefly write the points, and then after this, I will show you guys on the answer. Okay, we will inquire with the directors, why are they unwilling to make this disclosure or create a provision for this amount? We want to assess the reason why, okay, the reason why they do not want to provide for this. And basically, we want to assess the reasonableness of their claim. Okay, number one. Number two is we will want to review a correspondence. Okay, whenever there is a breach, there is three parties that will be involved here. Okay, whenever any breach so in this case, who are the three parties being involved? Okay, so right now there is the client, which is Encore Co. Okay, Encore Co. The second party is basically the, oh wait, hold on. I will draw it in this way. Okay, so this is the client, Encore Co. Whenever there is a breach, you have to ask yourself, who are the three parties being involved? Because for every breach, you want to talk about this in more detail. So second is basically the lawyer. Okay, Encore Co's lawyer or legal advisor. The third person is basically right now, the transport authority. Okay, so right now the third person is the transport authority. So why is this important? Is right now we're going to try to make a sentence out of this story right now. Okay, so basically, when there is three party involved, there will be correspondence, any discussions. Okay, so Encore Koni will basically talk to the transport authority on this complaint issue. Okay, so we can review any correspondence between the transport authority and Encore to establish the details of the complaint and the number of time breach has occurred. That's number one. So first we will want to review the correspondence. So this is number two lah, okay? Review the correspondence between Encore and the transport authority. Third is basically we want to review the correspondence between Encore Co and the lawyer, okay? Or maybe we can contact the lawyer to establish the assessment of the likelihood of this breach, okay? So this is something I want you guys to practice writing after this. Next point, so we have 1, 2, 3. Okay, so in this case, it is 5 marks. So we require 5 points. Okay, 1, 2, 3. Next is number 4. Is basically we want to, whenever there is a fine, and right now there is a possibility of a fine being paid out. So we can basically look into, what can we look into when there is a cash payment? What document can we look into, guys? Basically, we will review the bank statement. Yeah, we will inspect the post year-end cash book and bank statement to identify whether were there any fines that have been paid. Okay, so that's number 5. That's number 4. Number 5, whenever there is a major issue, okay, whenever, for example, a major issue will include this breach of regulations. Any major issue, this will be reviewed, this will be talked about in the board minutes. Okay, board minutes. Okay, so whenever there is a breach, this will be discussed in the board minute meeting. Okay, number 6 is this thing called a written representation. Okay, do you guys know what is a written representation? Written representation is basically like a document, or like basically a document where the directors of the company will sign this written representation to acknowledge their responsibilities. Okay, so this obtained written representation is an answer that is very useful when you are answering for your SP. However, it has to be one of your last points because it is more of to support other audit evidence. It's not very reliable, so it cannot stand on its own. Okay, so now we have 6 is written representation. Okay, so basically this is the main 6 points that we can actually expand on. Okay, so let me take you to actually writing the answer. Okay, so let me share my screen so we can do this one together. Okay. All right, let's go. On the SP on potential breach of regulations. Number 1, okay, number 1 is basically we want to inquire, right? We are inquiring with the director. Okay, so we will basically inquire the directors why they are unwilling to provide or make disclosure regarding the potential breach to assess whether the reason, to understand whether they accept that breaches took place but believe that the effect is immaterial, or whether they dispute the occurrence. Okay, so basically this sentence is just explaining why do they actually not want to make this provision? Is it because, first, is it because the amount is immaterial, or is it because they believe that this is unlikely to happen? Basically, maybe is it because they think that the chances of paying out this breach of regulation is remote? Okay, and if remote, we will just ignore. So basically, we want to inquire to understand what is the reason or what is the motive behind them not providing for this amount. Okay. Another thing is, remember, we will review correspondence with the Transport Authority to establish, okay, right now I want to relate to the scenario, okay, to establish details of the, okay, if I go back to the scenario, okay, if I open it side by side, okay. So the question states, a former employee has made a complaint, okay. So right now, let's talk about that in our answer, okay. Basically, you have to apply to the scenario. Review correspondence with the Transport Authority to establish details of the complaint and the number of occasions or the number of breaches that has occurred. Okay, so next point is we want to review correspondence with the legal advisor. Or with client's permission, contact the lawyer to establish, okay, this is very important, I want you guys to highlight, to establish the likelihood of the breach being proven and expected fines that would be payable. Okay, so in this case, this is how we apply to the scenario. However, more or less, any breach point, you guys can say the same thing. We review the correspondence with the legal advisor, or with the client's permission, we contact the lawyer to establish the likelihood of this breach. Okay, likelihood of this breach being proven, or this this case being successful. Okay, and expected fines that would be payable. Okay. Next is we want to inspect the post-year-end cash book. Post-year-end cash book and bank statement to identify whether any fines have been paid. Okay. Next is we want to review the board meetings to ascertain. The reason why we review the board minute meetings is we want to know what the board actually discussed about in relation to this breach. Okay, we want to review the board minute meetings to ascertain management's view as to the likelihood of payment to the Transport Authority. Actually, even if your purpose need is not exactly the same as mine, however, as long as it is like logical and related to the scenario, it is still acceptable. Okay, guys? So even if you guys want to tweak it to your own easier words, then that is still okay. Okay. Another thing that maybe we can talk about is we can maybe okay, right now the issue is that NCOCO has breached the regulation. Okay, so maybe we can review the policies that they have in place, policies and procedures that they have in place to ensure that the drivers are taking this compulsory rest. Okay, so review NCOCO's policies and procedures to record driving hours and rest periods, and compare this to the regulation concerning maximum driving hours to determine the likelihood that breaches have occurred and the frequency. Okay, so this is more or less because of the question lah. This is not something yang I will that is repetitive. So I want you guys to remember these 5 points that is repetitive. And lastly is on the written representation. Okay, so let's talk about the written representation. Obtain a written representation as stating that the directors, or confirming that the directors are not aware of any other breaches of the law and regulations that would require a provision in the disclosure to the financial statements. Basically, that they are not aware of any other breaches other than this that would require a provision. Okay, basically, another thing that you guys can say is obtain a written representation confirming that all the provisions are complete. Okay, so are you guys clear on this point? Maybe we can take a short break. Yeah, even though I just we spent a lot of time on the first question, but I want you guys to just kind of get the understanding or go back to the thinking process of how we are basically going to answer SP. Okay, so maybe let's take a 15 minutes break, okay? And maybe I'll see you guys at 9:55 before we proceed to the next question, okay?